As we continue to look at tape that was scenes rather from earlier today, and that is, you know, this madness around social media. A lot of the video that we're seeing here today are kids with their cameras out, with their cameras on their phones, obviously, recording everything that is going on, and then the anger starts to boil up when you see the innocent people that were affected today, just like the merchant that Ali just told us about. You know, people's lives were disrupted all because of just bad behavior by a young crowd today. Absolute inexplicable bad behavior by a young crowd. And, you know, these are hardworking New Yorkers. These are hardworking New Yorkers that woke up this morning so that they could go to their job to live, you know, the American dream.
Make a living. Make a living.
And this is what we end up with here today. And it just goes to speak of how the actions of just a few can affect so many.
Yeah, and as you were saying before, I mean, a YouTuber with this much influence, with this much reach, there's got to be some level of responsibility, accountability, some way to regulate what the result of your actions. I mean, it's just really breathtaking. Let's go back to Alice Gaynor. I believe you were at the news conference. Alice, what are your impressions? What do you have?
Maurice, we had another crew at the news conference. We were on the other side of the park checking things out. We've since come back. We're by East 15th on the east side of Union Square Park, where things are starting to open back up. The park itself still barricaded, still surrounded by NYPD officers, but we see people going in and out of the subways. Let's take a walk over here. You can see cars are still moving. People are now coming through because earlier they had put barricades up and nobody was getting through over here to Union Square. If we keep walking this way, you can see all of the officers over here. I want to try and see if we can get where all the damage was earlier with the construction area. I'm going to see how far we can go right here. Again, people are able to move through here. Before this was totally shut down. Yeah, you can see over there. If we go up, step up here, Don, we're going to be careful about this. If you look in the distance, you can see the orange barricades that were knocked over there by that subway station. I think we can keep going. They're going to let us through. Yeah, we're just going to walk along here. Again, NYPD officers, we saw them showing great restraint today. We witnessed them, you know, taking several bottles being thrown at them and other objects, as they mentioned at that news conference. You can see over here all the debris, the metal barricades, and you can see over there where things were knocked down, that green fencing that was up, that was pulled down. We saw people hanging off of scaffolds over here, people climbing up lampposts. We talked to a few people, asked, why would you stay if things turned chaotic? And they told us they thought it was fun. Again, these are teenagers, these are young adults. They're all on social media, they're following this person, they're here. They were treating it like one big party from what we could see. Again, we're giving you another look. This is a wide shot here. We're by Union Square East. Now we're by East 14th Street over here. Things definitely calmer, but I mean, just look at all the trash, the debris everywhere. And again, a lot of that was being thrown at some of these officers. There's the NYPD drone on the ground over there. That was their eyes in the sky, as well as the NYPD chopper, which is still up overhead. Maurice and Christine.
Alice, if Don can just take a shot of that scene as you look at the subway station one more time. It's empty.
Sure, Don, can you show us the subway station right there?
Or just the wide shot, even. Just if you back up a little bit.
The wide shot.
Yeah, just look at that. Just look at. This was a bustling, everyday scene in our city, right? And then it was taken over by a mob of kids. And now what's left behind is just debris and pigeons and damage and destruction just left in the wake. And now this has to be cleaned up, and now people have to move forward. It's just a striking aftermath.
We do see sanitation trucks.
Yeah.
We do see sanitation trucks here, so you're right about that cleanup. That's about to begin.
That's what they do, and they do it so well. But it's just so striking that this is what's left. This is it. And for really, literally no reason, no cause, no purpose, no demonstration, no slogan, nothing. And this is what we have. Extraordinary. It really is.
You know, it's taxpayer money that started the construction on that subway station there. It's taxpayer money that is now going to have to clean up this debris and mess that was left behind, and taxpayer money that will need to finish the repairs to this subway station.
And taxpayer money to hold somebody to account.
Absolutely.
Ultimately here. Alice, thank you so much, and Don too. You guys have done a beautiful job and excellent reporting and bringing the story home to us. But now we have the picture from the chopper on the right, a live look as well. They're basically protecting Union Square, and wow, they've successfully dispersed the crowd out of that area. It's breathtaking, right?
Really
it's almost as if the words don't match what we're looking at. It's really difficult.
Well, I think it's because it's so hard to understand why this happened and how a group of people can behave like this.
Right. It's so empty at the end of the day.
So right now we can tell you that there have been arrests made. We don't know exactly how many. We can also tell you that there were injuries. We don't know the seriousness of those injuries, but we did hear from the chief of department that he did see people in that crowd. They were bleeding, they were hurt, they were hit by objects that were being thrown. He mentioned paint cans, he mentioned bottles, he mentioned rocks, he even mentioned fireworks that were being thrown at just in the crowd, not necessarily at police. Of course, some of those objects thrown at police, but just various people within the crowd. And some of those injuries, he said, did require medical attention. He also said that he saw some people having panic attacks, asthma attacks. He said that his officers, as we saw here live on our air, every single one of those officers that we saw, that we witnessed at least, exercised great restraint here this afternoon.
Let's go back up to Dan Rice in Chopper 2. Dan, you're over the park right now, Union Square Park. What do you see? What are your thoughts?
A very different picture, Maurice, than what we saw 3 hours ago. When we arrived on the scene down here, there was just a sea of people, a sea of humanity down here, all the stuff that we were talking about, and now you're just left with the aftermath. It's an empty park, nobody inside the park. They have the barriers up, so the entire park is clear of people for the most part, but what you see is the aftermath, the leftover debris. As we zoom down here, you can see all that debris on the ground there. You have paper, bottles, traffic cones. We also saw some paint splatter all over the concrete and the structures down here. Look at that construction site that we had seen here, where we saw people on top of that structure there, on top of the subway opening. The walls that were torn down there. We saw the plywood being used. The plywood being used by the police as a shield to get away from there. And all of that now over. We just see members of the media down there telling their perspective of it. We come back over here to 14th Street, and even though the traffic is still being held here and no traffic going through here, just look at the mess that's left behind here. Just a sea of paper on the street. I gotta be honest, it almost looks like a aftermath of a ticker tape parade, if you would think of it that way. We have just all that debris that people have gone through here. They've done what they wanted to do, and now it's left for somebody else to clean up down here. But 3 hours later, they got everybody out of the park, and now the cleanup begins.
Some of the other reporters earlier to sort of compare today versus some of the other protests, that we've seen here in the past few years. I'd love to get your perspective on that.
You know, it was odd to watch this happen as it unfolded, because you saw the crowd surging. It was almost like it was pulsating down there. And you'd see people throwing objects, but without any intent, almost like they're blowing off steam. What they were angry about, or maybe what they were celebrating, it was obviously hard to tell from here. But what you noticed is that even though the crowds were over here on the sidewalk, you didn't see that urge to go in and loot, go in and cause destruction to the businesses that were all around here. And everything you saw, even though we are hearing of injuries, people being arrested, it was contained within the crowd, which is what was different about this situation than what we've seen in the past. I've been over the city at night, where you watched everybody going up the streets not knowing what they're going to do. Everybody pretty much stayed right here in this area of Union Square, and like I said, like a mosh pit, that pulsating that was happening in there, and everything that they were doing to each other, throwing traffic cones, traffic barrels, water bottles, and then unfortunately they did, for a short amount of time, change their direction of their debris there and throwing it at the police. But that was a short amount of time, and when the police came in and got control of the situation, everybody went a different way. So it was just an odd situation to watch from up here as opposed to the other ones that we've seen over the years.
And Dan, the crowds themselves, you've seen them disperse. Have you seen which way people have gone? Have you seen remnants of crowds in the last few minutes making their way uptown or east or west or anything like that?
The last crowd we saw was the one that Allie was following up on Park Avenue over there by East 28th Street. When they were leaving the park initially, they did go all over the place. When we saw the SUV going out 17th Street, we saw a small crowd go there. We saw a small crowd go out to 6th Avenue up into the 20s. But as they were going up, police would show up and they go a different direction and eventually just disappear. So in the last 15, 20 minutes, there hasn't been a big surge of people going through the city that we have seen up here anyway.
And as far as the police response, Dan, you know, again, comparing what we saw today versus times in the past when police have had to show up, for various reasons, whether if it was crowd control, whether if it was trying to gain control, of a protest. Can you tell us if you saw a difference today in the way that they responded, just given some of the criticism that was laid on them in the past and the promise from department heads that they would study past behaviors and make sure that changes are made?
So it's interesting you asked that, because when we saw the initial police response, from up here what you're watching are the supervisors in the white shirts, the officers in their uniforms showing up. Nobody had a shield. Nobody had their helmets on, the batons at the ready. They came in regular dress and regular uniform, and they just approached the crowd. And they started to go into this crowd. Clearly, the police were outnumbered by the thousands of people that were in the park. And as they would go through, you would see the crowds move away and let them come in. There didn't in the beginning seem to be a lot of animosity towards the police, and the police didn't seem to have that mentality that they were coming into a riot. It wasn't until everything started to break loose, when they started going out onto the east side of the park, that you started to see the police arrive in their helmets and their shields when it became clear that it was becoming more of a dangerous situation for the police. But when they arrived, absolutely, they came in just their regular street uniforms, trying to address the crowd, trying to keep them within the park, and trying to not necessarily calm down the situation, but just keep it at the place that it was.
And Dan, you've covered so many news events over the years. Never seen anything quite like this. We've got only about 15 seconds for a quick reply, but you know what I'm getting at, right, Dan?
Absolutely, and this, I'll be honest, in 30 years, it's the first one for me, Maurice, to see it like this.
Yeah, same thing. Takes your breath away. Thank you so much, Dan. Really appreciate it. And as we get ready to say goodbye here, we're just looking at live pictures from Chopper 2, Union Square, the scene this afternoon of, I think you can call it safely, unprecedented activity, where a mob of people showed up to respond to the YouTuber Kai Cenat, his call out that he was going to have PlayStations for 300 people. Instead, at least a couple thousand showed up and got out of hand, got out of control. No real explanation as to why, but there you see it, the police responding with a very restrained approach, and they were able to disperse them after a while, but for a while there it was super tense.
And we'll be following developments here tonight to get a better idea of exactly how many people were arrested, how many people injured, and what is next for Kai Cenat, and whether or not he will be facing any charges as a result of what happened here today. In the meantime, we will see you later at 11 o'clock. We thank you for joining us for this breaking news coverage. Now to the CBS Evening News.